All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the fascinating mechanics behind why buying a company share might not actually buy you a voice. If you've ever bought stock and assumed, hey, I'm getting a seat at the table, well, today's deep dive into the architecture of company ownership might just shatter that illusion completely. We are exploring a fundamental concept that flies totally under the radar for most everyday investors, the dual-class trap.
So, does owning a share mean having an equal say? Let's challenge that assumption right off the bat, because it's an illusion, really, that your slice of equity automatically grants you proportional amount of voting power. Traditional logic dictates this straightforward, one-to-one relationship. You buy one share, you get one vote. You buy 10% of the financial stock, you control 10% of the decisions. It just feels fair, right? It's the absolute bedrock of how we assume corporate democracy works. But, as our source material reveals, this assumption is fundamentally disrupted today. The reality of who actually calls the shots can be completely, 100% detached from who holds the financial stakes.
And that brings us to the exact mechanism that shatters that whole illusion, the dual-class trap. Now, this isn't a glitch in the system, it is a highly deliberate, engineered corporate structure. It's designed specifically to concentrate voting control into the hands of a select few, usually founders or key insiders, all while letting them sell off the actual financial ownership to the wider public. It intentionally decouples power from equity. Just imagine a scenario where two people own the exact same amount of stock, but one person's shares carry 10 times the voting weight. That's the essence of the dual-class structure right there, and it creates a very specific kind of trap for everyday investors who maybe don't read the fine print.
To see how this decoupling actually plays out in the real world, let's look at our source's definitive case study, SpaceX. Now, when a company reaches this massive scale, you'd naturally expect distributed decision-making, but their dual-class architecture literally throws the usual rules out the window. Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, looking purely at the financial stake, one individual holds 42% of the company's equity. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a massive piece of the pie and an enormous amount of capital risk. But technically speaking, it's still a minority share compared to the remaining 58% held by everyone else. If this were a traditional single-class structure, that 42% would translate to exactly 42% of the vote. The majority of the power would, rightfully rest with the combined voices of that remaining majority.
But here is where the trap snaps shut. Our source notes that this exact same individual, the one holding just 42% of the financial risk, holds a staggering 80% of the voting control. That slice completely dwarfs all other voices combined, reducing everyone else to a measly 20% of the voting power. This is the dual-class structure functioning flawlessly. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. The power to direct the company, choose leadership, and dictate the future, it's overwhelmingly concentrated in one set of hands, even though those hands hold less than half of the actual equity.
So the disconnect here is just stark. On one hand, you have a minority equity stake of 42%, and on the other, an absolute, insurmountable voting majority of nearly 80%. The financial exposure is shared broadly with other investors, sure, but the control, that is actively hoarded. And again, this isn't an accident or some weird regulatory loophole. It's a meticulously engineered framework designed to insulate operational control from the very people providing the majority of the capital. Because of this massive disparity, our source points out a pretty harsh reality. Any votes cast by retail investors are mathematically guaranteed to be irrelevant. Just think about the gravity of that phrase for a second. Mathematically guaranteed. It's not that retail votes are just unlikely to sway the outcome, or that it'd be tough to organize enough voters. No, it is a strict mathematical certainty that they cannot win. If one person holds nearly 80% of the voting power, the remaining 20% could vote in absolute perfect unison on any given issue, and it literally wouldn't matter. The decision is already made before the ballots are even sent out. The illusion of democratic participation looks great on paper, but the mechanical reality, it renders those outside votes entirely meaningless. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question to fundamentally reconsider what modern equity structures really mean for your power as an investor. When you buy stock in a company utilizing a dual-class structure, are you truly buying a voice in how that company operates? Or are you simply buying a ticket for the ride, hoping the driver takes you somewhere profitable while accepting you have absolutely no ability to touch the steering wheel? It's a critical distinction to understand as we navigate today's complex financial landscapes. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this structured dive has given you a much clearer understanding of the mechanics behind the dual-class trap.